be seated. As I was singing that song in the last verse, I was also reminded that we want to remember to pray for Ron Vaughn, whose mother was, she's under hospice care and wasn't actually supposed to make it through the night, but she did, so she is still here this morning. But this day is probably her last, and we all remember, for those of you actually don't, many of you don't, she actually worshiped with us for about a year before she moved up to Chicago. So remember Ron this week as he prepares for life without his mother. He is with her, and the family is with her even now. Matthew 11 is our text for this morning, and we're going to read through it, and then we're going to talk about it. I thought it was a fitting, this is the text in the lectionary, and it is on rest, and I thought, well, with VBS here this week, what a fitting prep for us as we begin this week and actually feel like nothing but rest even now. As we prep for that. One other announcement I forgot to make is there's actually in this county a VBS for adults this week. Every year we go and partake in Seven Rivers' summer conference. I actually went last night, and I thought the speaker was really good, dealing actually with some of even the themes that we were talking about, James and John. Talking about Jesus asking, what is it you want me to do? And they wanted him to put him on the right and the left. And he asked the very same question to a blind man a few verses later. And the religious didn't get it right. And the blind man just wanted to see. He wanted to see Jesus. And it was a powerful message. So tonight that's at 5. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, that's at 6:30. So if you want to come, there is stuff for the kids to do. I know it's a busy week. We actually thought about that when we scheduled VBS for this week, but this was just the best week for us to do VBS. If you do choose to come, Nature Coast sits in the back left corner by ourselves. You can join us there. No, the far left, as you're looking at it's a bigger auditorium. Some of us will be there this evening. Tonight at 5. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 6:30 if you want to come. But some of the themes actually were running through last night that I am here to share with today. My voice is almost gone. Thank you all for praying for me. This will actually be the 7th time I've spoke in the last 8 days. So my voice is weary. And I've just started to feel it the last couple of days. That and just being at camp where you yell anyway, and stuff going on that is there. So I've got my water here this morning. But to what shall I compare this generation? Jesus' words. It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to their playmates. We played for the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. So there's wedding and funeral stuff going on in there. For John, this is John the Baptist, came neither eating or drinking, and they say he's got a demon. The Son of Man comes, and he eats and drinks. And they say, look at him. He is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by her children or her deeds. And then Jesus began to announce the cities where most of his mighty works had been done, because they did not repent. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I tell you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom and Gomorrah, it would have never perished, and it would have been remained until this day. But I tell you, it will be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom than for you. At that time, Jesus declared, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and the understanding and revealed them to little babies, children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of God, it stands forever. You can go back to the first. I am going to kind of work my way through this. You know, when I first was working, I had no internet or anything this week either. So when I started first working through this, I was just going to kind of take those last verses. But the reality is Jesus' promise of rest that comes after everything that was said up until then. And it's just really powerful in what Jesus has done here. And so we're going to talk about this whole section of reading here. And it starts out, as always, if we actually read the whole chapter, the first few verses of this chapter, everybody is either confused or somewhat rebellious in this passage, at least if you tend to be of the religious sort or the religious lot. So the passage begins with John the Baptist actually sending people, because John's really confused. Because there is a lot of unrest going on, and John is feeling a little anxious, John the Baptist, because he's in prison. And he is anxious because he's not sure that this Jesus isn't quite what he expected Jesus to be. So what he does is he sends some of his own disciples to Jesus to say, are you really the one? Are you really the Messiah? Are you the one that I talked about? Are you the one that I'm coming? Because I'm confused. And I tell you, what you begin to see in this passage is Jesus is never what anyone expects him to be. He's never what anyone expects him to be. And so that's how this whole passage begins. And so John's disciples have come to him, and of course the religious leaders are listening intently to John the Baptist's disciples because they, in a way, do have the same question about what is going on here. And so they're all listening in. And so that's kind of where we pick it up. And Jesus says to them, what shall I compare this generation to? And Jesus really goes on quite the diatribe here. And you know, we're gonna pick that up here. Well, if I'm going to compare this generation, I'm going to compare it to little children who are sitting in the marketplaces and calling to their playmates. We played the flute for you and you did not dance. We sang a dirge and you did not mourn. So what this really is, and there's more to it here than I'm going to go into it, but Jesus is comparing this generation to whiny little children. You religious peepers, I've talked too much this week. You religious people, you're just like whiny little children. We play the flute and you won't come out and play. You're at a funeral and we play the dirge and you won't mourn. And then he goes on. You can go to the next slide. And for John the Baptist came eating and drinking, so they're fickle. They won't do this and they won't do that. And John the Baptist came eating and drinking, and they rejected John because he's got a demon. He's weird. He's harsh. He eats weird things. He dresses weirdly. He's got a demon. John won't eat or drink, but then Jesus comes and he eats and drinks. And what do the whiny little children say? John, you don't eat and drink. Jesus, you eat and drink too much. I mean, it's like the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears here. You know, we're going to try this. Oh, it's too big. Oh, it's too little. Oh, it's just right. And what is just right here? It's the religious leader's opinion. It's their opinion that matters, and Jesus is, to people anyway, or to themselves, and Jesus is saying, you are like whining little children. John the Baptist was too harsh, and Jesus was too much fun. You wouldn't want John the Baptist at a party because he's too boring. Everybody's inviting Jesus to the party because he's having too much fun. He eats too many tacos, and he drinks too much wine, and actually makes too much wine at the wedding feast. They're never happy. They're never satisfied. And what Jesus is pointing out, you know, the truth is, unless control rests with you, and unless power rests with you, unless your opinion is the only opinion that matters, you will never be happy and you will never be satisfied. You complain when they play the flute, you complain when they play the dirge, you complain when John the Baptist comes, and you complain when I come. You are never happy and you are never satisfied. When I look at this generation, Jesus is saying, I am looking at a generation that's tired and exhausted and not at rest because they are never satisfied unless it's their opinion or what they have concluded. Jesus says that is what this generation is. And that generation doesn't lead to any kind of rest at all. In fact, what Jesus is saying here, even when he compares them to whining little children, we would say this whole religious environment that Jesus is talking to is toxic. And where it is toxic, you will never find rest. You will never find peace. Because what the spiritual leaders of that day had done, what the spiritual counselors of that day had done, has rejected John. They've rejected Jesus, which leaves only who? Them. And their roles. And the way they do things. And Jesus is saying, that doesn't lead to rest. Again, we have a chapter break here, and I didn't read the first 8 verses of chapter 12, but I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story because it's very fitting, because right after Jesus says, come unto me, all you who are labor and are heavy laden, and you will find rest with me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He then tells a story about something that happened on the Sabbath. And all we need to do is go to the Old Testament. What would be one word in all of the Bible that you would attach to the word Sabbath? Rest. Rest. And he tells a story that on the Sabbath day, I mean, here is the toxicity. He kind of gives a living illustration of the toxic, whiny environment that he's in, because it's a Sabbath day, and you can read this when he goes home. And guess what happened on the Sabbath day? His disciples were walking through the cornfield, and they actually plucked some corn to eat because they were hungry. That didn't satisfy the spiritual counselors. That didn't satisfy the spiritual leaders. They immediately complained and said, what? You don't do that. And Jesus' point is, you know what? You've actually turned this idea of rest, and now we can't even rest on the Sabbath because we don't even know what we can or can't do. Man, that was actually a lot of even my upbringing. I mean, can't do this, can't do that, you can't do this. The Sabbath was anything with restful because I had to figure out whether I was doing was right or wrong, and I had no rest on the Sabbath because I thought I actually might be screwing the Sabbath up. It's exactly what's going on here. And we do it, and one of the things that Jesus is saying to this toxic place and this toxic environment is not only is there no rest, but there also, where there is no rest, there never is any mercy. That illustration, or that occurrence, it's more than an illustration because it actually happened in the first 8 verses, is about people who without rest are merciless. They are merciless in their competition. They're merciless with each other. Competition never breeds rest. And here we are on Lord's Day. I began to think this week that how did the church become the least restful place that you could probably attend every week? He gives the example. You picked corn. You can't pick corn. You can't do that. And it's funny because they're merciless. And what the religious leaders don't even see is, okay, they picked corn. But in their anger and in their rage, they're merciless. And Jesus finally says, you know what? I just desire mercy, not sacrifice. We get all in a tither and in a rage about something, and sometimes I wonder, I guess you could complain about that, but isn't that your rage? Like, hello, Mr. Spiritual One. We can do it too. You violate some behavior that someone thinks you shouldn't do, and they won't speak to you. You think, okay, which is actually worse? I actually had some time thinking about things that in our years here, and I hope Nature Coast is a place of rest, and the Lord is always drawing us there, but we are not perfect even in this. But I just began to think of just little things that, we do it. And here's what we do. It wasn't, a kind of a religious rule not to pick corn on the Sabbath. These things are going to bite a little bit, okay? But they're to a point because, one, I don't know if there are folks that still feel that way here. If that's okay, it's okay. We love you and hope this is a place of rest as well for you. But these are occurrences that, at least in the life of religious Nature Coast Church, have happened through the years that cause us to lose rest. We're coming here for rest. Did you see so-and-so? They brought their coffee in to worship and are drinking it. No. Why would they do that? They love Jesus. Don't they know? Don't they know what is going on here? And you know what else I saw? I saw one of the little Dresden kids. No, I saw one of the Sandefur kids, John Kelly. He was drinking coffee. Who lets their kids drink coffee? I don't know if John Kelly did that, but if he did, I don't really care. Who drinks coffee? Here we are at worship, and we're worried about whether there's food in here or there's not in here. These things actually happen. Nature Coast. I've just noticed that people don't bring their Bibles to church there. They don't bring Bibles to church. It's funny this week because you know what I did this first time this week? Because I had no internet and because I had no cell phone coverage, is I actually spoke from an iPad where all of my notes were. Listen, there's coming a day. This will be gone. And in fact, I've been at worship services, they'll say, open your Bibles or swipe your phones. Is that something to lose rest over? You see, we start to get a little uncomfortable because we tie things. Oh, have you been to Nature Coast after church? There are kids. They're just running all over the place. And Abel and Jackson, sometimes they come up here and they hit the drums. We lose our rest. I think it's Jesus' point. What is this generation? He can come into 2017. The church is the whiny generation. Always whining, always just always lost. And here's the truth. Wherever that is true in our lives, we are not at rest. We're not at rest. Just imagine, I do it too. I've got, just think of your pet peeves. We all have pet peeves. So please do not be judgmental on anyone who actually has said one of the few things that you said, because you and I have done it too. We've done it too. We all have areas, and I can feel my heart going to a non-place of rest. I'll give you an example. You guys know it, because some of it drives you crazy. And you say, I wish it wasn't this way. And you know what? Maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong. I can lose my rest because our announcement time on Sunday morning goes too long. Those of you who have made announcements know that. So I'll pick on myself. I've got plenty of areas that make this place and this time not a place of rest. And Jesus is saying, you whiny preacher boy. Nothing ever satisfies you. It's either too long or too short. And Jesus is saying, you know why we manufacture those burdens upon each other? Well, not only do I destroy rest for myself and my own heart, but more than likely in those circumstances, I am destroying rest for those around me as well. And it naturally happens, especially with spiritual counselors and spiritual religious leaders, because, if John the Baptist can't be listened to, and Jesus can't be listened to, but we can be listened to, then it's natural for everyone want to then please us. I wonder what Brad thinks. You create this environment that is hardly restful. We have a wrong view of rest, even with the Sabbath, and I'm going to go mainly now toward by the way, before I get there, it was funny because in the lectionary reading, or in the reading for this week, it actually was Matthew 11:16 to something, and then they skipped verses, and they immediately went to 25 to 30, which was the end portion, which is the come unto me all your labor. Guess which part they skipped? Jesus' judgment. It's like, okay, I'm not sure why you did that, but let's listen to all of Jesus' words here. And Jesus, one of the reasons you think Jesus is harsh, but what Jesus does is he actually goes to Bethsaida and Capernaum and these places which are, all to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which we saw a few weeks ago, and says, you know what, this whiny generation that can never be satisfied, who's actually had me come and actually seen the mighty works of God, which, by the way, is going to have everything to do with rest, but they refuse to rest. It's actually going to be worse for them. It's actually going to be worse for the people who went to church. I'll use it in the vernacular. It's actually going to be worse for people who went to church their whole life, or synagogue, or Sabbath school their whole lives, and maybe knew the Bible backwards and forwards, but turned it into a place of unrest. It's actually going to be worse on that day for Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, those are crucifying words, and he did get crucified. To take people who think they're the cat's meow when it comes to Yahweh and say, you know what, it's actually going to be worse. You don't have a place in heaven, you have a place in Hades. Jesus is coming. This idea of rest is a serious, serious thing, because it's pointing to whoever's work you are relying upon. So Jesus brings us to the Sabbath, and a couple of things as I go to the latter portion of this section is what Sabbath and rest is not. We even view church or Sabbath or this is the wrong time. You know what? Sometimes we actually, and I've heard this even said before, we actually will come on a given weekend to church and to worship, and we'll say, you know what, I need to go because I need to be refueled for the week. It's like, I need this day of rest so I can go work hard again for the rest of the week, and I will be refueled. It's like this is just a pit stop. It's a good pit stop. It's a needed pit stop, but it's just a pit stop so I actually can go live a life of unrest the rest of the week, and then come back on Sunday and get my rest again. I'll come into the pit. I'll get my tires changed and lubricated and all of that stuff, and I'll get the engine working again, and then I'm going to go revving for the rest of the week. Whew, I'm tired. Time for another pit stop. That's not the rest that we are talking about, because in a way, you know what that breeds is this reality that this becomes the pit stop. But you know what? The rest of the week, I've got to go earn my value and my worth again. And I'm exhausted from earning my value and my work again from during the week, whether it's my career or what I was doing. It could even be speaking at a camp and getting my value and work. And I need refueled. That's not rest. And I think the other one we touched on, which I'm not going to touch on, is I actually think we actually find rest in knowing we are right. That's why we tear each other apart or have to tear each other down or we gossip. We find rest when we have to know or we think we're right. You know, when I think I'm right, they're wrong. I'm at rest. I don't know how they live with themselves. You see where we go? Jesus is saying that's not where you find your rest. In circumstances of life. So the last part, the last couple of verses, here's where our rest comes from. Comes from Christ. Listen, he is not only talking to this whiny generation, he's talking to the people who are following them. And what he is saying is, you know what, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You know what? When you have rules about picking corn on the Sabbath, and all the other little rules, even about healing on the Sabbath and all of these things, if you are a follower of spiritual counselors or spiritual people, you start to live in that, and here's how we live. We try to conform to what other people think or other people want. Well, what does Brad think about that? I've got to conform to that. What is so-and-so? Forget about Brad. He's just a little guy teaching in Homosassa, Florida. But what about these real preachers who are on TV or they're on radio or they have mega churches? And, you know, I want to hear what they have to say. I need to know who to vote for. I don't know who to vote for. If they tell me who to vote for, then I can actually feel better that I voted for the same person that the spiritual leader voted for. Do you see how we conform and we seek to find our rest in things such as that? You know, oh no, we have this new issue coming up. I wonder what the so-and-so or the church thinks about that issue. Oh, I'm glad. And you know what? We're usually glad when it's just like we think. You know, we're always glad when God thinks the way we would think. In fact, that's just what we assume. The reason, you know, all that litany of things is I think God thinks that way too. I mean, if God were here, he wouldn't have very long announcement time. I know it. He'd get down. You know, that's what we think. And Jesus says, come unto me, that I am the place for rest. There's no reason you need to conform to what people think you should look like, or what it should be, or what, how it should go. I mean, it's just been funny. Our prayer lives are so, prayer, by the way, can be an absolute great place of rest. And for me, when I do it, it is that. There's something about even praying. And you know what I found in my prayer life? And we were mentioning this on one of our Sunday discussion groups. We were actually praying for something in Judy Peterson's life. And we followed it along. So we're like 5 or 6 weeks later. And the Lord has done something and given her rest. And it's not even what we prayed for 6 weeks ago. In fact, it's the farthest thing. That we can trust him and go to him and find rest to him, knowing that he is ordering and directing our steps. One of the reasons we don't rest is because we want to be in control. But to be in control for you and I means we will never ever rest. And it's the thing we obsess over. I obsess over my kids. I obsess over them when they're out driving their cars. I obsess over them when they're here and there. And I obsess over my finances. And I obsess over this because I'm always obsessing over what I think I can control. And Jesus says if you want true rest, you have to give up your control. It seems so un-Jesus to give up control. And Jesus is actually in this text, come unto me, he's inviting us to himself. He's inviting us to His work, to trust in His work. Let me hold your hand. Let me lead you. Come unto me, all you who are labored. Take my yoke. And we always think a yoke is something heavy, right? The yoke the oxen carry, or the yoke. But in this instance, it's talking about connection. Yoke yourself to me. Jesus is saying, come to me and connect yourself to me. Connect yourself to my finished work. Connect yourself to my life. I am the only thing that will give you rest. Jesus is saying, come unto me, because me plus nothing is everything. And you know what? If you connect yourself to me, you're not going to find me harsh. You're not going to find me mean. You're actually going to find when you connect yourself to me that I am what? I am gentle. I'm humble. I'm lowly in heart. And Jew will find rest for his souls. You know, the Gospels in the book of Genesis. We get confused. One of the reasons we get confused is, again, we've taken Sabbath. What did God do on the seventh day? He rested. Did He rest on the seventh day because, He was tired? No, He did not rest on the seventh day because He's tired. You know what He did on the seventh day? He rested because He looked at His work and He said, it is finished and it's good and I'm done. And I'm going to rest. And then He sends Himself on earth and we kind of blew it. And you know what the Sabbath is for us? You know what the Lord's Day for us is? It's to remind us that God has looked on your story and my story, that He is writing as the greatest author of all time. And yes, it's messy, and yes, it's going sometimes places we don't want to go. But He's calling us to Himself, and He's saying to you, it's not about your story, it's my story. And you need to know that on the cross of Christ, I uttered these words, it is finished, it is good, and it is done. Will you please come to me and rest in what I did? Will you rest in it is finished? Will you rest in everything I've done? Because everything is going to be made beautiful in His time. All things work together for good to them who love God. All these things are going on. So in the midst of pain and in the midst of heartache, in the midst of, by the way, this isn't a message. And again, you can see how we tie it to, well, what do you mean, Pastor Brad? I can't rest because this is going on and this is going on in my life. And the reality is, that's where our problem is our rest is tied to our circumstances. Our rest is tied to our control. Our rest is tied to our own desires. And Jesus is saying, give that up. I've got you. And I have finished. And just as on that seventh day I rested because it was good and I was finished and it was done, so it is true on July 9th, 2017, that it is finished and it is done. So come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly of heart. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Listen, if the yoke religiously and in churches is not easy and the burden is not light, it is not Jesus. It's too often not, at least in circumstances I've had, religion has not been easy and light. It's been a yoke of slavery. And Jesus is saying, if His yoke is not easy and your burden is not light, run away from that and run to me. Because I am your rest. I am your hope. You and I, we may not be the people we want to be. Romans 7, Paul tells us, the good he wanted to do, he didn't do. Every time I try to do good, evil is present with me. I'm in struggle. We may not be the people we want to be. We actually, in our lives, may be a long way from the goals we set for ourselves. Our stories may not look like we wanted them to. Relationships, marriages, broken. We may be disappointed in our lives. But Jesus is saying, whatever that story is for you, this morning I want you to rest in my unchanging love. Listen, these are Jesus' words, and you know what? He's gentle. He's meek. He's lowly in heart. Jesus said these words so you and I would read this morning, because guess what he assumed? That his followers would be what? Who grow weary. We would become disheartened along the way. We would suffer pain. We would suffer loss. We suffer loneliness, rejection, and betrayal. Jesus knows that our spirits would get sapped, and so he gently comes to us. He says, hey, in the middle of all of the toxic environment, whether it be the world or whether it be religious, come to me. It's finished. I am done. The writer of Hebrews says this, that we come boldly in our weariness and our struggle to a throne whose name is grace, to find mercy and help in our time of weariness, tiredness, loneliness, and pain. Our rest does not come from our circumstances. It comes from the promise of Jesus. Jesus came to save the weary and the worn out. So if you're weary and you're tired and you're worn out, Jesus has you right where he wants you, so that you would come and find rest in him. You know, one of the reasons we're not at rest is because we're so busy, and sometimes we're so busy religiously. Jesus is saying, you know what, you're not saved or justified by your busyness. You're saved by my grace. You're saved because God madly loves you, not because of who you are, but because of who he is. He's calling you to rest this morning, not because you should, but because you can. And his invitation to rest is not, here's the invitation, I'm going to give you something to do. But it's come to me, and I will carry you. Come to me. Rest comes not from us doing, but from letting us give up control and letting him carry us. If you come into Nature Coast Church, this may be the first time you're here. You come in all the time. You come in just recently. You would know that this text is one of the passions and visions of this church. As we live in a world, ourselves included, that's exhausted. We're exhausted. And you know what? We're not necessarily exhausted. We can be exhausted because we try to do too much. But this isn't about, this again is not a sermon about you need to cut back. You need to quit being so busy. You may need to do that. I don't know what it is. But again, that's a do something in order to get rest in your life. This isn't a sermon on how to get back. You know, when I used to work in the corporate world, we had what we called PL time in the healthcare world. You would earn it. You know, and if you earned so many years or times of PL, you earned your vacation. This isn't that. You don't earn this. This isn't about cutting back your time. It's in the midst of relationship, trying to figure out, in the midst of what are you doing, if you are exhausted mentally, if you're exhausted emotionally, it actually may have nothing to do with how busy you are. It actually may mean that you're trying to find your value and worth in what you're doing. This is what rest is. This isn't the pastor needs more vacation so he can obey this command. No, the pastor needs more Jesus. And so our motto is, we have an inexhaustible grace of an inexhaustible Christ for an exhausted world. And as you come in every week, come unto me, all who are tired and worn out, and I will give you rest. Our rest. Your rest. And my rest comes from the one who paid it all. Are you weary? Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you done? Come to Jesus. He has you in the most perfect place you could ever be. In the place where he can grab you and say, I've got you. I'm going to carry you. I've looked at everything my son has done, and it was good, and it is finished. And he died, and I rose him from the dead so that he could hold your hand and carry you all the way home. Great hymn of the faith, Amazing Grace, is this: 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and his grace will lead you